Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program and the Interplanetary Chase. You join us back in the space plane hangar where we're continuing development of our previous proof of concept helicopter, except this time we're kind of living up to what I thought we might do in the last episode, where I thought we might be able to replicate something akin to collective to use instead of changing the actual RPM of the rotors. We could angle the blades like you would in an actual helicopter to increase the amount of lift they produce. And of course, so far so good, as you've seen in that little couple second clip there. Obviously it is working, but it's not making any lift because of course the rotor of which is contra-rotating almost acts as a counterbalance and obviously has nothing to spin. So of course the top one is spinning really slowly. But ultimately, here we go, we're adding the other rotors now, just making sure that the rotators work correctly, and as you can see, it does make lift. It's enough to ping our nose up into the air, but of course, because it's right at the front, it's, you know, it's not exactly gonna fly. So gonna top that off with a heat shield once again, second rotor on the back like a Chinook, and up we go. Absolutely wonderful. So I think this is a successful proof of concept. We're going to see if we can develop this a little bit further, just to see what we can and can't get away with. For example, like maybe a horizontal flight instead of just being a VTOL, we could kind of make it so it's able to move forward at a decent pace. And of course we need to check how much mass we can kind of get away with adding, such as experiments and fuel and all that kind of jazz. So here we go. Fuel tanks on the wingtips, they're empty at the moment because we're just using them as means to attach landing gear, because of course we kind of need that. So here we go, another test, up we go, and as you can see it is able to lift itself up under its own power, which is always nice. Quite stable, owing to the winglets which have been angled up a little bit, kind of encouraging the nose down. Obviously when it builds up enough speed that just comes straight back up, and it's a nice kind of pendulum of forward motion, if you will, as we crash into my building. But no matter, it's time to add some bigger solar panels, I think, because they make more power. Yes, they're heavier, but ultimately if they make more power, that means longer flight time, and it kind of, you know, it's a kind of self-resolving problem, so to speak. So once again, we are able to get off the ground a little bit slower. We're at full collective, and we're only just managing to maintain flight. So of course, I think we're reaching our kind of limit of mass as we land on top of a spaceplane hangar here. Once again, we're going to see what we can get away with. So it's around this point where I figure we can add some more fuel and maybe a jet engine and an air intake, and of course might be able to assist us with forward flight, and as you can see it most certainly does. That's given us a lot more power because of course there's a lot more air going over the blades, thus more lift, and it's nice and controllable as we land on the VAB. Of course, problem is we need that rear bit to be a docking port, as you can see, which means we have to relocate the jet engine, and we actually have two of them now, along with a couple of intakes, and once again fuel lines just to make sure that they stay supplied. And let's give this another try, shall we? So up we go, engines are on. It's not able to lift itself up without the assistance of the jet engines. However, I would say that is to be expected given the additional mass. So maybe a little bit more fuel and a winglet just to help in terms of keeping the nose pointing to where our prograde marker should be when we're moving forwards, if that makes any sense. A couple more batteries to encourage the weight forwards after we added that winglet, and of course we do need an antenna to communicate with our satellites or whatever it may be. So once again, up we go, or not. Jet engines need to assist us up, and it's not very stable. It looks stable in the footage, but of course that's because, well, firstly it's accelerated, and of course I was pushing down as hard as I could and it wasn't really going down, so a bit more mass towards the front perhaps. Once again, jet engines need to assist us with this liftoff. It's a bit better this time, and as you can see it's a fast mover, coming in at around 50 to 60 meters per second. So quite proud of this so far, and as you can see it kind of hovers at full collective. Not really, it's falling at about 4 meters per second, but once again taking out some fuel, up we go again. It's taking some time, but here we go. Now maybe we need to adjust the RPMs to see if that would assist us, and we are able to get up under the force of our own blades this time, which is good. And the winglet went pop when we landed there, so we might need to get rid of that. Adding some batteries, some reaction wheels, and here we go, another try. And here we go. So we can get up under our own weight, which is good, and of course we're just moving these winglets backwards to maybe assist with keeping the nose pointed down under forward motion. Although the problem with that is, of course, it adds more weight towards the back, which is obviously making it table heavy and defeats the point of us moving the winglets back in the first place. So we're going to put those back, and as you can see it's working. Well, I wouldn't say well, but it is certainly working. In order to possibly keep the tail pointed to where it needs to be, we're going to rejig the rear blades. So we have 6 of them. 6 of them? Sorry, 4 of them. So 4 at the back and 3 at the front, and as you can see it's a lot nicer this time. So I think we're getting somewhere now. We're just going to maybe rejig the front RPMs a little bit more. See what we can do in terms of stability, and as you can see the nose is wanting to drop, which is good. Which means that all we have to do is keep pulling the stick back a little bit, so to speak, and we should be okay. And as you can see, nice landing on top of a VAB. And I think there's a couple more modifications we need to make, as of course we just admire what we've done so far. Now of course, bigger antenna, because of course the other one didn't particularly have very good range. And ultimately this is the kind of proof of concept that we settle on. It works. As you can see, it's able to lift itself up under its own lift from the blades. We can activate the jet engines, which obviously help us in terms of providing forward motion. Accelerating nicely. You may notice we have quite low fuel, however that's just because, once again, these engines firstly don't use much fuel, and of course we need to limit the amount of fuel we can carry owing to our own kind of lifting capacity. As we're going to take this thing for quite literally a spin around the vehicle assembly building, as you can see. Around the launch pad sides, I'm going to burst climb up. So far so good. I think this would be better if we had actual helicopter blades instead of elevons, because of course they're not particularly for what they're designed to do, if that makes any sense. They're not doing what they're meant to, but of course they work. But I think helicopter blades would ultimately make more lift. But that's a technology we don't have yet, of course, because we need to unlock the aerodynamics node as we firstly just extend our antenna and make sure it doesn't collide with our elevon blades, which it doesn't. So that's good. That's wonderful. So in terms of what we want to do next, I want to attempt to deploy some ComSats around the dual system, ideally Leif, because I actually want to end up sending one of our helicopters, whichever obviously we end up building, to Leif and to transmit some science back to Kerbin, because of course we've not been there yet. A helicopter, well, I think that works quite well because we've not been to Leif yet. All I know about Leif is that its atmosphere is quite thin. So I don't know if the kind of typical fixed-wing design would work particularly well. And obviously, if we can get more air over the lifting surface by spinning them, hence helicopters, then we might be okay. Now, of course, we're having some difficulty with attaching these satellites. As you can see, I wanted to attach 4 of them, but the relays are just far too big, and even then they still collide, so we actually have to angle them outwards just a tiny little bit, get everything strutted up, and try and build something resembling a fairing, which ultimately ends up looking a bit more like an egg. I'm not a fan of the looks, but ultimately, you know, it will work as we get rid of our fairing. We're redoing it after placing some, obviously some solar panels and some batteries inside. 1000 deploy force clamshell deploy yes please on 2 sides, and of course big RCS tank followed by lots of RCS thrusters, nice big fuel tank. Then I think we're going to go for an engine plate, and this will be kind of our transfer stage, so to speak, with some nuclear engines for the sake of efficiency, so yes please. Followed by a smaller antenna, decoupler, sorry, and then nice big fairing underneath that. Move that up and close that off to make it all nice and flush. Make sure everything's auto-strutted and manually strutted as well, just for the sake of structural integrity here, as we are having some difficulty finding our root part. And another fuel tank, big adapter, massive fuel tank, and of course an engine plate. I think we're going to go for quad bore engines for the sake of having enough thrust to get this thing off the ground. It's a pretty chunky rocket. Speaking of which, we're adding some chunky solid rocket boosters here, as you can see. I believe these are the Clydesdales, as we put a nose cone on top of those. Can't forget the Separatrons to pull them away when we get around to decoupling them. Struts to make sure we don't wobble. Winglets for the sake of aerodynamic stability, and launch clamps. And I think what we are actually going to do is put a decoupler underneath the RCS tank as well, which means that we may be able to get away with putting some monopropellant puff engines here, so it's almost its own kind of orbital manoeuvring stage, like an OMS, so to speak. And of course, just making sure our staging is all good. And one last thing, we do need some solar panels on the outside of that stage, because of course the only ones we have are inside the fairing, which means that if those can't see the sun, then we're going to run out of power and just end up as a dead stick as we break 10 kilometers. Very, very fast descent owing to the sheer amounts of thrust this thing makes. And get rid of those SRBs and Separatrons, pull them away nicely. Get rid of the top fairing. And of course, all we need to do now is think about circularising as we are slowly coasting our way up to our apoapsis as it stands. I'm not particularly concerned with regards to how circular our orbit is, because ultimately we're only going to be transferring this thing to the dual system anyway, so of course we don't intend on hanging around. That is, as long as we are in a transfer window to dual, which I don't think we are, so of course we're going to use the transfer window planner to assist us. And of course we're just showing the phase angles here so we can get those correct. And then of course we will need to quickly just quick save, obviously back at the Space Center before our ejection in case we do anything wrong. I don't think we will, but here we go. And then of course we want to show ourselves the ejection angles so we know which way we need to burn, in order to obviously get a Kerbal escape and a dual encounter, which we're not doing a very good job of, I must say. But this is me just I'm kind of still learning this mod. It's very helpful from what I can gather, of course. But once again, I'm still quite new to the idea of transfer windows. All I know is there are certain timings. And then when you reach that time, obviously it's either a prograde or a retrograde burn from Kerbin, depending on where the planet is in relation. As we fire our engines for this manoeuvre, you may notice that we're wobbling a little bit, and I think that's owing to the gimbal on the bore engines. Not only do they make quite a lot of thrust, but they also have quite a lot of available kind of thrust vectoring, which means they're constantly overcorrecting themselves, and it's not ideal, but of course we've made it work. Now, what we also need to think about doing is, of course, we need to see if we can get ourselves a Lathe encounter, which is a little bit of an ask given our current heading, as you can see. Although we are slowly bringing our inclination to where it needs to be. Looks like we are getting a bit of a gravity assist from Joule here, so I'm not entirely sure where Lathe is going to end up when we obviously get there. So we'll see how this plays out, and obviously we're just time warping to our brand new manoeuvre nodes, turning down the gimbal on the bore engines. However, they very quickly run out of fuel, so that's not particularly important. Now, once again, just completing this burn, slight mid-course correction. Wonderful, and I believe that's done. And of course we're going to do another one just for the sake of making sure we end up to where we need to be, because as it stands, as you can see, we're actually going to collide with Joule for gas giants, which is the last thing we need for these satellites. Here we go, just using the little GUI in the bottom left corner of the manoeuvre modes, so we can be a bit more precise. As you can see, we have got a periapsis around Lathe. So we're just going to time warp to this. I've skipped that time warp because it took a little bit of a long time. So here we go, just doing that burn with our RCS thrusters, just where we have a bit more control over those. And ultimately I think, do need to think about bringing that periapsis down a little bit, because we don't have enough delta V, I would say, as it stands, to circularise. So we might need something that can help us reduce some speed. And of course, Leif has an atmosphere, so we may be cheeky and see if we can attempt an aerobrake, as we need to do one more correction here, otherwise we're going to completely overshoot. And we need to bring that periapsis down to underneath 50 kilometres, because where Leif's atmosphere is so thin, it has quite a low atmosphere in comparison to Kerbin. So here we go. Firing the engines, and oh dear, the atmospheric heat that we experienced, albeit very quickly, was enough to basically decommission one of our satellites. As you can see, it completely took the relay off, which, you know, is quite necessary for what this thing's job is. But regardless, that only leaves us with one satellite now, which is less than ideal. So, given our current situation, I'm not aborting this mission, but we do have a bit more realistic objective now, being that if we can circularise, I want to park this thing in basically a high orbit around Joule, so we can send another unmanned mission with a bit more of a reliable communication network, because of course we can talk to Kerbin and this satellite if we lose line of sight to Kerbin, so that should be okay. As we've just refilled our electric charge here, you can see our ejection angle is slowly curving inwards, and if we keep burning retrograde, then we should ultimately get a periapsis. A little bit of a visual bug owing to the patch connects here, but as you can see, we do have periapsis now, or periapsis, apoapsis, which means we can coast up to that and circularise our orbits, hopefully. However long that takes, of course, given that we're using ion engines. As we're just pushing our periapsis out now, I think we're going to go for 250 roughly. I was thinking 200, but of course that will bring us a little bit too close to Joule's outer planets. I believe that's not Moho, is it? I can never remember. Regardless, as you can see, we are bringing our apoapsis down from however high it was, hopefully down to roughly, like I say, 250. The problem with this is that the passive antennas that don't break in atmospheres only have a range of roughly about 500 kilometres. Which means at some point we will need to think, of course, about moving the, or not moving, but maybe even sending another satellite around Leif that we know will be able to aerobrake and eventually circularise, so that can talk to whatever's down on the surface, and of course then relay that to this satellite high around Joule and send that data back to Kerbin. But regardless, this satellite is almost where it needs to be. I did go back to the Space Centre until I realised that the inclination is completely off-centre. We need for it to hopefully be in roughly kind of an equatorial orbit around Joule, and that has been done. Only problem is, once again, we have managed to find ourselves in a retrograde orbit. It's usable, but of course it's less than ideal. Anyway, back to the spaceplane hangar here, and I was hoping to make some finishing touches to our science copter, but as you can see, the save file for this vehicle has somehow been absolutely destroyed, and everything is wonky. It's all the wrong way round, and I don't have a clue as to how this happened, other than the fact that I may have changed the routes to the docking port. So I'm blaming that on an error in quality assurance, and as such we need to think about maybe building another helicopter, and if we're going to do that, then of course we need some more science to hopefully get the aerodynamics nodes, and of course unlock actual helicopter blades rather than using elevons as a make-do solution. So we've modified our VTOL that we used a couple of episodes back, and we actually have a Kerbal on board this time with some of our brand new experiments. Just taking this around the Space Centre as we did last time, and getting a bit of science from the experiments that haven't been performed on each building, or technically each biome yet. And as we can see, so far so good. That spaceplane hangar done. We've just done the vehicle assembly building here. And time to land on the... I can never remember what this building is here. It's like a reception of some description, as we touch down on there. Deploy all once again. Keep that data. Collect all. And up we go. And of course, next up is R&D. As we gently begin our ascent. And there we go. Ooh, almost. There we go. Nice touchdown. So once again, deploy all. Keep what we can. Collect all. Transmit what we can and get rid of stuff that is really just taking up space and not worth anything. Up we go. Tracking station. Absolutely. So we almost crashed there. I underestimated how long it would take for those jets to spool up as we deploy all. Unable to do an EVA report because our hatch is obstructed by the AC block on the building there. So once again, try that again. Collect that. Wonderful stuff. Up we go. I'm wondering if there's anything over at the launch pad that we haven't already collected yet, because of course we did have rockets there with all of our science as well, so that might already be done. But of course, there's no harm in trying, so touchdown. There are a few that haven't been done yet, so we'll do those now. See if there's anything on top of the actual launch pads, which there is not. So we're going to switch off the engines and recover that, which takes us up to a nice chunk of science, and we have more than enough, of course, to research the aerodynamics nodes. So we will absolutely nab that. We're having a look at advanced aerodynamics next up, but of course we can't afford that just yet. So, like I said, ladies and gents, we now need to think about building another helicopter. Of course, hopefully this time the save file doesn't mess up. So we do have a brand new cockpit, followed by a drone core, nose cone, avionics adapter, and a reaction wheel with a battery, followed by our science bay. And I'm thinking of how we're going to build a fuselage here, because of course, with everything this far forward, the centre of mass is a less than ideal place for obviously where we would end up putting our rotors. But we'll make it work. Here we go, little passive antenna on the drone core. We get rid of that air intake round the back and put a docking port there, because ultimately I think that's more useful, and I'm not sure this thing's going to have jet engines, but you know, we'll see. Followed by a little girder on top, nose cones on the ends, and now we actually have somewhere to put our rotors as it stands. As we go for our contraprop kind of design once again. Followed by some servos to act as collective. As I demonstrated earlier on, that seems to work really, really quite well. And then look at this, actual helicopter blades, which I don't doubt are going to make absolutely loads more lift than the Elevons did. So of course we'll see when we come around to testing this thing, which I imagine we'll be doing shortly, because of course this is kind of a basis of our design, and if this doesn't work, then you know, what's the point? So here we go. Just making sure everything's lined up as it should be, and here we go. So bring up the torque, throttle up, and as you can see we need barely any throttle to keep this thing in the air. So I think so far so good, right? As we go back to the hangar here, time to add some wings on the tail, and I'm thinking maybe kind of the Lancaster bomber kind of style tail with the long tail planes and stabilators. Stabilators are not what the Lancaster had, but it's what we have on the tail, as you can see. Followed by some swept wings, air intake on the bottom. We've capped off those wings with a fuel tank which we've emptied. Well, not completely, but put a jet engine on the back there, and then some rotators on the front, because I think we might be able to put some electric propellers there as well, just for the sake of auxiliary kind of propulsion. So just trying to find a way we can attach these without having them clip. And as you can see, put a little nose cone there which has an attachment point on the end, and that works rather quite well. So tiny little blades, just making sure they're kind of pointing in the correct directions, given the ways these are going to rotate. Can't forget about our control surfaces, of course. And let's give this a nice test, shall we? So of course, throttle up, well, not throttle up, but because of what we've done and the fact that we didn't move the main rotor, the centre of mass has changed, which means it's completely unstable. So we're just going to move that back, give it another try. Once again, bring up the torque, bring up the collective, up we go. Bring up the torque on those propellers. They're not doing anything right now, but of course that's because we haven't deployed them, so they're not biting into the air. So we do that now, and as you can see, they are beginning to pull us forwards, which is good. The jet engines are, of course, assisting, although I'm not sure those are particularly necessary. So we're going to get rid of those for now, which also means we can dump our fuel and cap the ends off with some nose cones there. Once again, we need to reposition the main rotor because that's slightly off-center because of a change in mass. Make sure those propellers are already deployed when we spawn, which means they will bite into the air. And so far so good, of course. So just binding those propellers to our throttle. Bring up the torque of the main rotor. Up we go, and the propellers are very slowly beginning to pull us along. So of course this is nice in terms of possibly saving power, because this means we don't have to pitch forwards and increase our collective as much, which means the engines will have to work harder to maintain RPMs. And we can switch those off, we can hover quite nicely in place. So far so good. Now battery round the back maybe, just to provide a bit more power. Time to add some solar panels to of course allow us to recharge as and when required. And I think we're going to cover the wings in these. In real life, of course, this wouldn't work because it would disrupt the airflow, but this isn't real life, this is Kerbal Space Program, and we can get away with it. So here we go. I mean, I have seen, of course, some remote-controlled aircraft which have solar panels almost completely flush with the aerofoils. So I suppose technically it's possible. It's probably not very cheap to do, but that's besides the point. As you can see, solar panels are on, it's working, we're flying, and it's quite manoeuvrable, all things considered, probably owing to the additional lift provided by the main rotors here, as you can see. So that's wonderful. Now ultimately I do decide to kind of re-angle those solar panels, because you may or may not have noticed, but they were slightly off-centre with regards to the sweep angle of the wing, so we're going to redo that, and as you can see, I would say that is suddenly looking a whole lot better. So we need another antenna, and a big antenna, so obviously when we've landed we can deploy this and talk to hopefully the satellites that we'll end up putting in orbit around Leith. Move those wings in slightly, followed by some reaction wheels and a battery round the back, mystery goo round the front and round the back of the engine nacelles. And of course, what's a science copter without science experiments, right? So it's time to add some of these, just around the girder of the engine, because of course the engine should be the last thing that crashes into anything, which means that worst case, the science might have a relatively good chance of surviving. Speaking of which, we're going to add a science storage unit and some additional experiments around the front. The reason I'm cramming so much is because I actually want this mission to be unmanned. And as you can see, Jebediah has snuck his way into the cockpit there as we do EVA reports. It's managing to keep itself stable owing to the drone core and SAS modules. As we come back to land, of course we do have that remote control drone core, and Jeb has got some more science for us, which is nice. And once again, this should hopefully be an unmanned mission, but for now, Jeb has a ribbon, being the 1% fuel landing ribbon, which I don't really think counts, given the fact that this is flying by electricity, but regardless, we're coming up to the end of today's episode, so thank you ladies and gents very much for watching. Please like and subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys in the next one.